Hey, Dara, can you hear me?
I can hear you. Can you hear me? I can hear you.
Hello, hello, hello.
I hear you, Lori. Do you not hear me?
Microphone.
I can hear you just fine. There we go. Can you hear me now?
Yes, I can hear you.
Woohoo! Yeah, I could hear you the whole time.
Oh,
Yeah, we have others joining us as well. Wonderful. Just so you know, you don't need video. You can if you want. But you should be seeing on your screen right now the front of the PowerPoint. Is that what you see? Okay.
beautiful.
There we go. I'll let everybody know if they want to be anonymous, they can. You can turn off your video. If you want to mute your microphone, you can, or you can leave it on. We're going to be talking to each other, so you can turn it back on when you want. Under participants, there is a box where you can click yeses and nos. You just have to re-click them to take them off. And this will be videotaped for, I guess, do they call it videotaped still? This will be taped for use for our cooperating teachers who are going through clinical faculty training to be able to come in and listen as well as other participants from the Virginia Best Practices Network. Well, welcome, good morning. Are we ready, Peggy? Looks like it's being recorded. Good morning, my name is Dara Hall. I'm going to be facilitating this conversation. And I'm glad to have you guys join us today. It looks like we have about 7 participants today so far. If anyone joins us later, we'll see them as they come in. This morning, we're going to be talking about the guidelines and framework for developing diverse, culturally and linguistically competent clinical faculty. It was a project by the Virginia Best Practices Network, which is supported by funds appropriated by the Virginia General Assembly in year 2019 through a competitive clinical faculty grant program. And this is being managed by the Virginia Department of Education. It will be shared across the state as well as in statewide and national conferences. So we're going to be sharing the good information and the work that's been done so far, which is only a very beginning start to an important conversation. So today, what we're going to be talking about is this framework and guidelines that were developed, and the purpose of them was to help develop a curriculum to train mentors based on a need right now for diverse, culturally and linguistically competent mentors. And the hope is that by developing a framework and guidelines, that we would be able to ensure consistency and very intentional, achievable outcomes that can be used anywhere across the state. It doesn't matter what institution of higher education or what school divisions might be incorporating these ideas into a workshop or professional development opportunity, that it could be used for anyone that needs it. And while we discuss things this morning, we're going to be referring back to the report that was sent to you in the invitation to join. So if you don't have a physical copy in front of you, you might want to open up an electronic copy, because we're going to be referring back to the actual paper report throughout this conversation. Before I get started, do I have any questions? Okay. Mary, you're checked off with a yes. I just want to make sure that that was back from whether you could hear me.
That's correct.
Okay. All right. So the first part is, why are we doing this? Why is this important? And we know that classrooms today are very diverse. In fact, we're going through a census year, and projections back from when it was last done 5 years ago said that more than half the nation of children under age 18 will be coming from racial and ethnic minorities, which of course then transfers this idea of what is a minority. So we're talking about the traditionally marginalized populations that are now very evident in our schools. And so the Department of Education identified that there was a gap in our schools working with these traditionally marginalized populations. And a concern that teachers really need the knowledge, the dispositions, and the skills to really engage all of their students. In education, we know that there is a problem with the fact that our teachers don't necessarily look like our students. And so we need to support our teachers with the challenge of teaching diverse students effectively in their programs as they're preparing to be teachers, and then once they become in service. So this is why this important work was being done. Good morning and welcome to those who are joining us now. And so this grant that was developed by the Virginia Best Practices Network reached out to me and my colleagues that are part of the Mid-Valley Consortium for Teacher Education. So the link, which I don't think you can click on directly on your screen, but you can look at it on the JMU website. It's on the Education Support Center website. There's a link for the Mid-Valley Consortium. And this is a consortium of 7 school divisions and 4 institutions of higher education that's been around since the 1980s. So we have been working together in collaboration, developing primarily workshops and training opportunities to work with cooperating teachers, teachers in the schools that work with our student teachers in order to become clinical faculty, a designation that means that they are now trained with the skill set to be able to effectively work with our student teachers. And in addition, we have added many different levels. So we also train these now prepared clinical faculty that have opportunities to work with our student teachers in the field. And we further work with them in order to work with beginning new teachers in the field, because it looks different when you have somebody that's in your classroom all day versus somebody that you have to be checking in with while you're both teaching at the same time. So we have different skills, different abilities, and we're going to be talking about both of those populations, but it's the same person that is mentoring both the pre-service teacher and the in-service teacher that we'll be discussing. So the Mid-Valley Consortium consists of school divisions in Shenandoah, Page County, Harrisonburg City, Rockingham County, Waynesboro City, Stanton City, and Augusta County. Those are the 7 school divisions. The 4 institutions of higher education that have been involved in this process are James Madison University, Bridgewater College, Mary Baldwin University, and Eastern Mennonite University. I have some colleagues from some of those universities that have joined us this morning as well, and including 2 of the co-authors on this report, Lori Wall and Ron Schultz are both joining us today. So they might chime in, I hope, as we go through this conversation. We should start with a disclaimer that as a group, we did not feel that we were the experts in the area of cultural competence as we developed this. The purpose of bringing us to the table is because what we've been doing for a very long time collaboratively is designing and facilitating clinical faculty workshops. When this was brought to us, we recognized a deficit for ourselves that we were not incorporating as much as we should be in order to meet this idea of how are we developing clinical faculty that are diverse, culturally, and linguistically competent. So we took on this idea with the thinking that we could really help to improve our own practices within the workshops that we are offering, and then offer this to the rest of the state to be able to improve their own trainings or develop their own trainings, depending on where they are in the process. The vision of the guidelines and framework that were developed is that we would have more mentor workshops that could be created or revised throughout the state, perhaps even on a national level as we look to sharing this information later down the road. That the mentors for our teacher candidates and our beginning new teachers, those are who we referred to as clinical faculty earlier, will have those skills, the dispositions, the abilities, the knowledge to be able to work with our, with our population, with our new students, with the beginning new teachers, because the mentors will be reflective, they will be inclusive, they will develop the cultural competence skills, and they will build relationships across diverse communities. So that was the vision that guided the work. And as we thought about the work, we realized that it's really three different big parts. It's not about what happens with the mentor or what happens with the mentee, but it's really both of those pieces. So we believe that a mentor has to have a growth mindset. They have to be willing to understand their own biases, and they have to be able to grow in their knowledge and understanding of diversity. This is part of a continuum, just like instructional practice. We also believe that a mentor has to help the mentee develop a growth mindset and their own cultural competence, as well as helping a mentee to develop and grow professionally and instructionally as a P12 teacher, hopefully who will have retention in the field, that's going to meet the needs of their community of learners that is going to be highly diverse, and to help positively impact that learner and their families and the larger community. So our hope today is that the participants who are listening in at some point or who are involved right now, if you develop mentor workshops, that you'll be able to come away after reviewing this report and asking any questions with the ability to either develop, if you don't already have a curriculum, or revise the curriculum that you have to develop cultural competence with new objectives and planned activities in your curriculum. If you're a participant who's actually a mentor, if you're going to be clinical faculty, if you are a teacher that will be working with beginning new teachers or be working with student teachers, then we hope that you come away with a concrete understanding of cultural and linguistic competence, goal setting related to your own growth and your own cultural competence, a plan to model cultural competence in your own classroom, and a plan for at least a few of the activities that we're sharing that you're actually going to utilize with your mentee when they're in the classroom. Just want to check, do I have any questions to this point? Okay. So where we're going to move to is talking about the curricular framework that already exists through the Mid-Valley Consortium. The work that we are doing currently is on pages 3 and 4 of the report. It is the framework by which we currently train or prepare or develop cooperating teachers to work with student teachers and then later with beginning new teachers. So all 6 of these ideas are incorporated into our workshops at different levels depending on who the focus mentee is. So either way, any curriculum working with beginning new teachers or student teachers, someone who is going to be a mentor must understand their mentee. They have to understand them as a learner. They have to understand their characteristics. They have to understand how they may be different than themselves. So your mentee might come from different perspective, a different lens, a different generation, a different background, culture, gender, have different experiences, have different cultural diversity. And so understanding your mentee is a very important part of the starting place, I believe, of any curriculum that develops clinical faculty. The next piece is establishing a relationship. As we know, collaboration in a mentor-mentee relationship is very, very important. And in order to develop the trust that will come along with being able to give meaningful feedback that is rich and helps to develop someone, you have to start with that relationship. You have to be welcoming and inclusive. So that piece is a big part of the workshops that we do as well. The third part is this intentional co-teaching, the strategies that are going to allow a mentor and mentee to work together to develop. So we talk a lot about how co-teaching is not just instruction. It's the co-planning and the co-assessments and all of the parts that go along in the process for working together in order to meet the needs of all learners in the classroom. So those strategies should be a part of any workshop that's developing student mentors to work with student teachers or mentors to work with beginning new teachers. Additionally, we talk a lot about the standards for teachers. We frame our workshops using both the Virginia Performance Standards, and that's actually the assessment that our consortium utilizes all 7 portions of the Virginia Performance Standards. So we teach and we train through that assessment. But in general, those standards are important for mentors and mentees to understand. And more importantly, or as importantly, I guess, are the in-task standards. Our accreditors, CAPE, help to propel this importance. But really, this is the idea that there are 10 standards through in-task that our beginning new teachers, our student teachers, and our mentors should all be aware of, because it's a continuum of learning. It's a progression of the fact that we come into the field as a novice educator, we get better and better, and even once we're an expert educator, we continue along this continuum, and we are reflective practitioners that are constantly improving our own practice. So we find that that is a very important part of any workshop in developing clinical faculty. One of the things that changes the game for us between a cooperating teacher and a clinical faculty is the time that a clinical faculty mentor will spend conferencing and observing their student teacher or their beginning new teacher that they're working with as a mentee. Those pre-conferences, that time spent collecting data purposefully with the training on different observation techniques, whether it's at task or whatever type of data collection technique you're utilizing, is very vital to be able to show why you're sharing the feedback that you're sharing. And then having those post-conferences are really very, very important to the whole process. So that is part of the curricular framework as well. And the last piece, depending on the level, is the type of mentoring conversations and coaching strategies that you're going to utilize. So take an opportunity to think a little bit about your own experiences in mentorship. What was the most important thing to you as a mentor and as a mentee? those thoughts that come to your mind are what helped us build the objectives and outcomes as we looked at what's missing and what needs to be added in order to develop a culturally competent clinical faculty mentor. The objectives and outcomes that are here, there's only 3 listed here. There's actually there's 12 objectives that were developed with 15 outcomes. I'm sure there's many, many more. This is not an exhaustive set of objectives that you might have for a clinical faculty mentor, nor the outcomes that might come out of that process. But this is what guided us in developing the activities and resources. So we are going to look at it. These are on pages 5 and 6 of your report. So we're going to look at the report through these lenses of how we would hope that the clinical faculty mentor will be able to show that they have an understanding of the objectives or an awareness of the objectives are listed. Take a moment to look at those objectives and outcomes in the report. Do I have any questions to this point? Okay, so we're going to consider these objectives and outcomes. And as you are developing a workshop, or as you are working with your mentee, if you're a teacher, and you're working with either a student teacher or you're working with a beginning new teacher, you really have to determine which objectives and outcomes you'll focus on. So you can't try to do everything at once. This is a lot of information with a lot of ideas, and you might be in a different place depending on the workshop you're developing or where you are in your own practice as a mentor. And so your starting point might be different. The things that need to be incorporated might be different. But we saw this all as relevant and important objectives and outcomes. You just can't try to do it all at once. On page 6, it describes that within the framework, there are 4 areas of understanding. It's an interdependent understandings throughout this framework that we're going to be discussing. So even though we're going to break each of these sections separately, they certainly flow into each other. They flow across each other. You cannot have a concrete understanding without modeling those understandings, without helping your mentee to grow, without helping yourself to grow as well. So we're going to talk about each of these ideas within this both cyclical and interdependent framework as we continue through the report. So let's consider first, what do we mean by having a concrete understanding? Why is having a concrete understanding important? Other important questions are, how can a concrete understanding be developed? And then as a mentor, how do we go from my understanding to our understanding as we work together with our mentee? So as you look through the booklet, you will see that there are several pages that describe concrete understanding with many activities and resources, some of which that are hyperlinked that can be utilized for developing a concrete understanding. But what we're really talking about is developing an awareness of all of these important ideas, some of which we sometimes know the definitions of, or so we think, and then as we spend more time reading the literature and talking to others, our definition continues to grow and develop and improve over time. And we are constantly in this continuum of development in our understanding. We want to co-construct the definitions with our mentee, whether it's our student teacher or a beginning new teacher, because we might have our own definitions, but we need to understand what our definitions are, and we need to use shared language to be able to develop definitions of ideas such as, what does it mean to be culturally competent? What does it mean to be linguistically competent? What really is diversity? What does it mean to have a growth mindset? So these are all ideas that really need to be discussed between the mentor and the mentee. And then once you're using shared language and you're having these conversations, understand where the gaps are between your definitions. There might be areas of gap. So that's really key. The other part of this is transparency. These are difficult conversations. We call them critical conversations, but we have to be transparent. We have to develop the trust that will allow us to have these conversations. And the best way to get there is to practice. So not to avoid conversations, but to have them. Throughout our work, and a lot of work that's happening at James Madison University right now, as well as through our consortium, is that we're recognizing that there are many microaggressions that are occurring. Our student teachers are experiencing them, either feeling them themselves or seeing them perpetrated on students, P12 students in the classroom. And it's very, very difficult for somebody in that position to know what to do. So having those conversations about how we will recognize microaggressions when they occur, what we're going to do about them, how we can help to arrest them, what we might do in our future, how we might make changes, how we will continue to improve our own practices is vital as having an understanding. So we have to know where we are at any given time. And the way we get there, we know we are all reflective practitioners. So we just need to keep reflecting and considering and thinking about how we can move on from where we were. And having those critical conversations and moving on is really vital to having that growth mindset, that we're constantly looking to improve our practice. Question? Okay, so the next section to consider is now, what are the attitudes, the skills, and the knowledge that I need as a mentor to understand and communicate and interact with people across cultures? That's a pretty loaded question. There's a lot packed in there that would need to be unpacked in any conversations and professional development that would be done. But this is a time to understand who I am, to understand what are my own biases, and knowing my biases, how do they impact my practice? Our mentors need to consider, we all need to consider, where am I in my own cultural competence, and how can I continue to grow in my practice? So our hope is that one part of a workshop that would be developed would be to have the mentors spend time self-assessing. There are so many different ways, but self-assessment is really necessary to understand one's own beliefs and how they impact their practice. So we have listed on pages 10, beginning all the way through to page 12, a number, again, of activities and resources to enable a mentor to work on self-assessment in a lot of different areas. They can analyze themselves in terms of what is their mindset, their personality, their generation, their beliefs, their behaviors, their dispositions. There are so many types of self-assessments available to understand where they are, where I am, where we are, in order to be able to have the continuing ability to mentor and help a mentee. So an area of self-analysis as well is in recognizing and reflecting on implicit biases. There's been a lot of good work, particularly out of Harvard, on with the Project Implicit, where we hope that people will spend some time looking at how their biases for race, gender, sexual orientation, and other areas of biases are, so that they can understand where they are and reflect on how that impacts their practice. We hope that built into any curriculum will be the opportunity to build relationships with people from different cultures. And so having those in-person workshops is really helpful. Having opportunities and ideas on how we might interact face-to-face with people is really important. But building relationships, we know, is an important part of the experience of being able to work with people across different cultures. Reflecting on your teaching style and how that impacts the decisions that you make, and exploring your own identity, whether it's your whiteness or whatever other critical aspects of your identity it might be, or understanding your culture, your religion, your traditions, all of the beliefs and all of the ideas that help you to identify as you do is very important in self-assessment. We hope that a mentor that goes through training will think about what's going to happen if a mentee observes me doing something, or instructing in some way, or behaving in some way that needs growth. How will they feel safe to talk to me about it? How will I be open to the understanding that there might be areas of my own growth that I hadn't considered? How will we be able to have a constructive conversation, and how will I be able to improve my own practice? So all of that is packed into this idea of mentor self-assessment. The next section to consider is, what is the value of role modeling in mentorship? We talk about it a lot, but why is this important? Why does my practice and what I'm doing in my classroom affect, of course, our student teachers, but beginning new teachers as well? And at what point does modeling occur during the mentorship relationship? Because it's this modeling that we're going to look at. Mentors model so much beyond instructional practice. Mentors are modeling sociocultural consciousness. They're modeling their attitudes towards diverse students. They're modeling the ways in which they confront barriers that exist in their schools, and how they can act as leaders and agents of change. And they're modeling their culturally responsive teaching strategies and how they're considering students with multiple perspectives. So modeling is pretty important, obviously, to the mentor-mentee relationship. And so we have a lot of activities and resources for modeling as well. They're found on pages 12 through 14, and they cut across some important ideas. In modeling, transparency is the key, right? So we cannot model our behavior in private. This is something that's being observed, being discussed. They're seeing stuff. They're going ahead and doing similar things as a mentee. So we have to be reflective in our practice. We have to have a growth mindset. We have to break the silence when we see microaggressions occurring, when we see injustice. As mentors, it becomes critical for us to model what we hope the next generation of teacher will be doing in their own classrooms and in their own communities. We also need to model through the in-task standards, understanding, of course, that education, that being a teacher, that those standards are a progression. We want to be modeling the most difficult thing that happens for beginning new teachers and student teachers is classroom management. So how are we modeling fair and equitable classroom management? And if that's not what we're modeling, how are we being open to allowing our student teacher or a beginning new teacher to be able to share their questions and concerns about what's happening in the classroom? And what is the work that we're doing as mentors or in developing our workshops in being able to understand and remove the power differentials? Because when we have a mentor-mentee relationship, we understand that the mentor comes in as an experienced teacher and the mentee is either a teacher candidate or a beginning in-service teacher at the novice level, and this creates an inherent power differential that needs to be discussed and addressed, and whenever possible, removed. And the last section, we really need to consider, are our student teachers and new teachers prepared for culturally responsive pedagogical practice? They're more recently out of their schools and their programs, and perhaps much more aware than some of our mentors who have been in practice for a long time and may not have the same lens or scope as some of our newer teachers. And how can the mentor help their mentee to grow in cultural competence? The ultimate goal of clinical faculty, of course, is to support mentee growth. That's the whole reason we have mentors in the field. So the activities and resources for mentee growth found on page 14 through, I believe, page 17 are using the entire curricular framework that we discussed earlier, those 6 areas. So each of the activities and resources listed in the report with their accompanying ideas, there might be some links, there might be some resources that we hope that you will go back and read and utilize in your practice, uses the entire scope of the curricular framework because ultimately we want mentees to grow in all of those areas. So as we are developing this curriculum, as we are working with our mentees, we hope that you will be intentional and work together, co-constructing, developing, and having a shared culture in the classroom. This is the end of the review of the report. If you have any interest in finding out more about the Mid-Valley Consortium. There is a website. There's also an opportunity for anyone that ever is interested in the curriculum that we provide. It's 2 full-day workshops for developing clinical faculty and 2 full-day workshops for developing clinical faculty mentors to work with beginning new teachers. You're welcome to contact me. We can set something up. We thank the Virginia Clinical Faculty New Teacher Mentor Best Practice Network for inviting us to be a part of this, and we were very glad to participate. And I will end this with, do I have any questions?
Thank you, Dara. That was very informative.
My pleasure. Any questions from anybody?
No, I have no questions, and I agree. It was very informative.
I'm so glad. Well, I hope you all have a very wonderful day, and it was a pleasure having this conversation. Hopefully we'll be able to do it in person sometime as well.
Great. Thank you so much. And I will post this to all of the participants so they will have the recording of this session.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Have a great day. You're welcome. Take care, everyone.
All right.
Bye-bye.
Bye.